I remember the moment of impact, as though it were a thunderbolt striking the core of my brain, for it changed everything. One moment, I was piloting a light cargo freighter through what had been described as the Ferran corridor, an uncharted backwater region of space, with unstable routes and only the faintest whisper of civilization. The next moment, the transport's navigation console erupted in a shower of sparks. A scorching wave of heat lanced across the hull. The starboard engine lost power abruptly, and I had no choice but to make an emergency descent. I had hoped for a controlled landing, but Ferran had other plans for me. The planet's atmosphere, swollen with particles of red dust, battered the ship. I wrestled the controls as best I could, my eyes darting between flickering hazard lights. The altimeter spun in frantic circles. Winds roared outside with savage intensity, and then came the agonizing crunch of metal against stone. The crash left me disoriented, strapped into the pilot's chair with half the console on fire. I kicked the emergency release to free myself, coughing smoke from my lungs. Outside the shattered viewport, I glimpsed the bleak desert landscape, rolling dunes tinted in ochre and red, shimmering beneath a sun that felt unkindly close. With a desperate scramble, I found the extinguisher and managed to quell the flames still licking the edges of the flight panel. The cargo in the hold, at least, seemed intact. But the ship was a ruin. I collapsed onto the dusty floor, letting a wave of exhaustion wash over me. My name is Marcus Torellis, an independent contractor, sometimes smuggler of rare artifacts, sometimes legitimate transporter of cargo for better-paying clients. I had been entrusted with precious goods on this journey, a sealed container rumored to hold advanced terraforming prototypes critical to some frontier colony's survival. Now all of that was stranded along with me in this wasteland. I was alone amid the whistling desert winds, pinned under a blazing sun, tethered to this broken hulk of metal that once carried me across the stars. I wondered how I might survive even a single night on this hostile surface. Yet the planet did not remain silent to my presence. Almost immediately, I felt the subtle hum beneath my feet. Ferran was not lifeless as some star charts suggested. It had a pulse. Its dusty dunes hid deep secrets, and I would discover them soon enough. For now, I forced myself to search for supplies. The craft's interior was half collapsed, but I managed to rummage through the wreckage, finding water purification tablets, ration packs, a meager medical kit, and the standard survival gear mandated by interstellar regulations. I pressed a trembling hand to my forehead and felt a shallow gash from the crash. Blood had dried in the scorching heat. Even as I conducted my inventory, I became aware of a sensation as if being watched. My skin prickled. Slowly, I lifted my gaze from the twisted hull. At the edge of the clearing, perhaps 50 meters away, stood a figure, too distant to make out details, but it was certainly humanoid, frozen in place. It observed me with unwavering intensity. My first thought was to call out. My voice, hoarse from smoke inhalation, cracked. "Hello." No response. The figure did not stir, merely stood as still as a statue, a silhouette against the swirling dunes. I raised a hand in greeting. Still nothing. Wariness crept in. Part of me wanted to beckon them closer, for I was in dire need of assistance. Another part of me instinctively tightened around the sidearm strapped to my thigh. Strangers on a remote world were not always friendly. The figure, slender, perhaps female, tilted her head slightly. Then, with a graceful pivot, she vanished behind a ridge of crimson rock. I remained where I was, uncertain whether to chase her or remain behind. The stifling heat pressed down upon me, and an ache pulsed behind my eyes. Survival had to be my immediate goal. If I rushed off, I might only doom myself in the desert. Reluctantly, I set aside my curiosity and got to work. Hours passed. I cobbled together a makeshift shelter using scrap from the wreck. Sand-laden winds scoured the outer hull, ensuring constant rattle and groan around me. When evening drew near, the sky turned a deep bruised purple, and the temperature dropped precipitously. I lit a small fire in a recessed corner of the hold, careful to ventilate the smoke. My thoughts drifted to the mysterious visitor, wondering if she was real or just a hallucination conjured by my wounded mind. At length, exhaustion claimed me. I drifted into uneasy slumber, lulled by the moan of the gale through the busted panels. A single question haunted my final moments of wakefulness. Would I see that strange figure again? By dawn, the cold of night receded, replaced once again by the scalding desert sun. I roused myself, heart pounding, mind swirling with questions. I spent the morning examining the hull's damage, hoping against reason that I could repair the ship's distress beacon. My cargo might be precious, but it would do me little good if I perished out here. Crawling inside the battered cockpit, I opened the communications panel. Though the main thrusters were hopeless, the short-range transmitter might still function with some creative rewiring. I rummaged around for tools, only to realize they were in a storage locker, partially crushed by the crash. Getting to them required prying open twisted beams. Sweat trickled down my brow, stinging my eyes. The heat soared, and I had to pause several times for water. It was then that I heard a faint scraping. I froze, senses sharpened. The sound came from just outside the collapsed cargo door. Slowly, I rose, sidearm in hand. Through the warped gap, I caught sight of her again. The same figure from the previous day, definitely female, with lean, sinewy limbs and skin tinted a pale bronze. She crouched low, peering into the shadowy interior of my craft, as if searching for something. Indeed, she had the countenance of a predator, alert and poised. A stray shaft of sunlight illuminated her features. Her eyes gleamed amber, and her hair, wild, unkempt, hung around her face in tangled braids. She wore strips of hide or cloth around her torso and legs, the garments dust-worn but clearly crafted with care. Feeling an unexpected pang of empathy, I slowly set down my sidearm, though I kept it within easy reach. My voice, still rough, emerged in a low whisper. "Hello, I'm not a threat." She regarded me without expression, tilting her head at an angle that accentuated her sharp cheekbones. A faint breeze stirred her hair. Then, to my astonishment, she spoke a single word in a language I did not recognize. Her tone was guarded, almost accusatory. I raised my hands, palms outward, showing I carried no immediate weapon. "I don't understand," I said gently. For a moment, she remained motionless, and I wondered if she might flee again. Instead, she drew a cautious step closer, bare feet silent on the scorched ground. Now I could see the details of her attire, a patchwork of sand-colored furs bound with sinew, and a small belt hung with sharpened pieces of bone or stone tools or weapons, perhaps. She exuded a wild energy, like that of a feral huntress. Slowly, I pointed to myself. "Marcus," the first said, enunciating. Then I gestured to her, palm upward, hoping to convey that I wanted to know her name. She studied me with unblinking eyes. A hush settled between us. At length, her lips parted, and she uttered a soft sound, "Kiera." Her voice rasped, as though seldom used. I nodded eagerly. "Kiera?" I repeated, relieved at this fragile bridge of communication. "Marcus," I emphasized again, placing a hand on my chest. She seemed to understand. A flicker of curiosity crossed her features. Before I could attempt further conversation, her gaze drifted deeper into the ship's interior. She sniffed the air, and I realized she must have caught the scent of the stale rations, or the faint metallic tang of the burning console. An impulse seized me. I reached for a water canister, holding it in front of me. I took a sip to demonstrate it was safe, then extended it toward her. Her nostrils flared, and she hesitated. Tentatively, she moved closer, slim fingers darting out to clasp the container. She lifted it to her lips, drank with a cautious tilt, and then lowered it, eyes wide with a mixture of awe and suspicion. This small act felt momentous, as though bridging the gulf between our worlds. I motioned for her to keep it. She nodded, pressed the container to her chest in gratitude, but she did not smile. Instead, she cast a glance at the horizon, where a swirl of red dust rose in the distance. Then, without warning, She stepped backward, turned, and sprinted away across the dunes with a grace born of long adaptation to Ferran's punishing climate. I leaned forward, watching her receding figure until she vanished behind the rocky outcropping. Again, that sense of being haunted clung to me, an inkling that she might reappear at any moment, an ever-watchful guardian or an equally watchful threat. With the day advancing, I turned back to the vital task, the communications panel. My hope was that, if I could rig up a short burst distress call, perhaps a passing vessel or the colonists for whom I was transporting cargo would pick it up. Yet something in me was hesitant. There was a wild enchantment about Kiera that beckoned me to remain alert to this world's mysteries. The planet itself whispered in the swirl of sands outside. A practical man by nature, I ignored the romantic ideas crowding my mind and forced myself to focus on the wiring beneath the console. For hours, I tinkered. Sweat pooled at the small of my back, and every so often, I had to stop to drink and rest. At last, I managed to jury-rig a power source from the emergency cell. The panel flickered. I typed out a distress message, shrashed on Ferran, need assistance. Coordinates unknown, sending emergency pulse. With a push of the final key, the system hummed, pulsing a signal that, I prayed, might be picked up eventually. Darkness began to creep into the sky. My day's exertion left me weak, yet I forced myself to remain awake, scanning the horizon for any sign of Kiera. Nothing stirred but the relentless wind. Recollecting her abrupt departure, I wondered what she had sensed in the distance, some threat, or merely an errand that called her away. Fatigue overwhelmed me. I once again built a small fire, nestling amid the battered remains of my craft. Before sleeping, I whispered a hope that tomorrow would bring rescue, or at least more answers about this strange woman and this hidden world. Morning light, tinted red by the suspended dust in Ferran's atmosphere, seeped through the torn plating of the freighter. I woke gasping, sweat coating every inch of my skin, and realized the ship's interior had become an oven overnight. I hurried to extract myself from the stifling wreck, carrying the water supply outside where the air, though scalding, felt less suffocating. Stepping onto the cracked expanse beside my crash site, I paused. Something felt off. I scanned the wreckage. A few footprints marred the sand near the cargo door, footprints that definitely were not mine. A prickling unease slid down my spine. Had Kiera returned during the night? Had someone else? No matter who it was, they must have come silently. I had been too exhausted to stir. My cargo was still intact, the sealed container unbreached. A chunk of me felt relieved. Another chunk realized that perhaps its contents were no secret. If someone like Kiera, or worse, a band of scavengers desired them, I might be in grave danger. A sense of protectiveness rose within me, conflicting with my own survival needs. Wiping sweat from my brow, I pulled out a ration bar. As I gnawed at the tasteless compressed nutrients, I surveyed the horizon. The desert around me was vast and still, the distant dunes rising in shimmering waves. The only motion came from swirling dust devils, ephemeral ghosts chasing each other across the plains. Yet the feeling of being watched would not relent. With a jolt, I remembered the signals I had sent the previous day. Could it be that someone had already landed? My heart pounded. The shifting dunes provided ample cover for stealthy approach. If indeed some band of opportunists had arrived, deciding caution was best, I checked my sidearm's power cell. One more shot left, just a single charge. Beyond that, I carried only a small knife, a poor defense if facing organized attackers. I spent the next few hours walking the perimeter of my crash site, gathering scraps of twisted metal that might serve as barricades or signals in the event of an approach. The scorching sun drained my strength quickly. Time seemed to stretch. Each hour bled into the next. At midday, I spotted movement at the edge of my vision, Kiera again, materializing from the dunes. This time, she approached openly, her posture almost regal. The water canister hung from a makeshift strap around her shoulder. She carried a leather pouch in one hand. When she reached me, she opened the pouch, revealing dried strips of some pale meat. pungent in smell. Cautiously, she offered one to me. It might have been lizard or something else that roamed these deserts. Regardless, the gesture was an undeniable show of goodwill. Starving, I accepted. The taste was salty and unfamiliar, but it was nourishment. Kiera crouched, watching me with a steady gaze as I chewed. She spoke in her unknown language, voice rumbling low in her throat, and though I understood no words, I sensed she was asking if I was well. "Thank you," I murmured, placing my hand on her arm as a sign of appreciation. Her skin was warm, a trace of dust clinging to her like a second skin. She did not shrink from my touch. For several moments, we just existed side by side, the hush of the desert wrapping us. Then I tried to mime the crash my descent from the sky, the loss of power. I pointed to my communicator and gestured as though turning a dial, indicating help might come. Kiera watched intently, nodding as if to indicate she grasped bits of my meaning. Her expression tightened when I motioned to the cargo hold, as though she grasped the significance of the sealed container. She made a gesture of her own, tapping her chest, then pointing to the horizon, indicating a place beyond the dunes. She repeated the sign, tapping her breast, then pointing again. I realized she might be telling me of her home, of a settlement or dwelling that lay out there. The prospect of civilization, or at least shelter, excited me. But caution reared. Was it wise to leave the craft with all its supplies, including the cargo, unguarded? Then again, if help never came, my chances of survival would be slim. Kiera seemed to have fared well on this desert planet. Perhaps she had resources. As I mulled my options, she rose, her lean frame taut. With an unexpected burst of speed, she spun around, scanning the empty plains. A low growl emanated from her throat. Startled, I reached for my sidearm. She glared at a point far off, where a dust cloud drifted anew. For the first time, I detected fear in her stance. She seized my wrist, tugging me insistently. The meaning was clear. I was to follow her. She repeated the gesture, and when I hesitated, pointing to the crashed ship, she hissed in frustration, eyes flitting back to the swirling dust on the horizon. Something was out there, something that clearly worried her more than leaving me behind. Swallowing my doubts, I made a decision. I scrambled inside the ship, grabbed the small bag of ration packs, the medical kit, some essential tools, and carefully slid the sealed cargo container deeper into the wreckage, hoping it would remain hidden behind steel plating. Then, slinging my supplies, I emerged to find Kiera waiting, tense and silent. She took my hand, guiding me with surprising force. We set off across the desert, the blazing sun overhead. My heart pounded in my chest, uncertain but strangely exhilarated. In that moment, my reliance on this mysterious huntress, who barely spoke my language, became absolute. As she led me into the unknown, I felt the stifling dread of pursuit. Something or someone was drawing closer, and we had little choice but to run. For what felt like hours, we traversed the sea of sand, the heat radiating up in waves that blurred the distance. The dunes rose and fell in endless succession, each crest revealing another vista of emptiness. Yet Kiera pressed on without hesitation, her sense of direction unerring. She seemed to know every ridge, every boulder that jutted from the scorching earth. At last, we reached a rocky escarpment that towered above the drifting sands. Hidden in its shadow was a narrow cleft, just wide enough for a person to slip through sideways. Kiera motioned for me to follow. I squeezed through the gap, emerging into a shaded hollow on the far side. The relief from the sun was immediate, a cool hush blanketing the place. Within this hollow, natural rock formations shaped what appeared to be a rudimentary shelter. I noticed faint carvings etched into the stone spirals, lines, and symbols that might have meaning for Kiera's people. A small fire pit rested near the center, ringed by stones blackened from frequent use. Here, the air was notably cooler, likely thanks to some subterranean vent or trickle of moisture deep below. Kiera gestured for me to sit on a flat rock near the wall. Then she crouched, rummaging through a modest stash of supplies, More dried strips of meat, a skin of water, bundles of plants that might have medicinal properties. Seeing this, I realized she had been living here. The notion that she might dwell alone, surviving off the desert's meager offerings, spurred a mixture of admiration and sadness in me. How lonely a life it must be. I tried to convey gratitude, placing my palm over my heart and bowing my head. She nodded solemnly but spoke no words. Only after she offered me a drink did she finally break her silence, murmuring something in her language. The cadence of her words was melodic, yet edged with caution. She looked toward the cleft by which we had entered. Her golden eyes narrowed. "Are we being followed?" I tried to ask, employing gestures to illustrate pursuit. Kiera hesitated, then nodded slowly. My pulse quickened. That dust cloud we had seen someone or something was tracking us. Could it be scavengers? Mercenaries? The region was lawless enough that any manner of bandits might roam, seeking crashed vessels to strip for parts or plunder for profit. A chill rippled through me. If they found my cargo and discovered me alive, what might they do? Kiera stood, grabbed a bundle from the corner of the shelter, and walked back to me. Within it lay a curious artifact, a small, triangular stone carved with intricate lines, faintly luminescent in the dim light. She held it carefully, as though it were a relic of great importance. She pressed it into my hand, urging me to examine it. Up close, I saw the lines formed a pattern reminiscent of circuitry, though obviously ancient. The stone pulsed with an inner glow that felt warm against my palm. My breath caught in my throat. Where could it have come from? Kiera pointed to the carvings on the wall. I recognized shapes similar to those etched on the stone. Then, with pantomime gestures, she traced a shape in the air that looked like an arch, or perhaps an entrance. She tapped the stone again, pointing deeper into the rocky enclosure. It dawned on me that she was indicating there was more to this place, maybe an entire subterranean network. The thought both intrigued and unsettled me. Ancient structures, hidden beneath the desert. I was no archaeologist, but I knew the worth of such finds. Some said Ferran was once home to a lost civilization, though official records called the planet a barren wilderness. If that civilization had left behind relics or technology, the cargo I carried might be linked, or it could be pure coincidence. But why did Kiera entrust me with this piece? I wanted to ask about it, but my attempts at conversation stalled. Her language remained opaque, and my desperation to understand her only grew. Nonetheless, she seemed eager for me to keep the artifact, carefully folding my hand around it. A sudden noise echoed from the cleft outside. We both froze, a scratching, sliding sound, a low murmur of voices, definitely more than one. My heart hammered. We had taken only moments to rest, but it seemed those trailing us had closed the distance. I scrambled to my feet, pressing my back to the stone wall, sidearm in hand. Kiera, more accustomed to stealth, crouched near the entrance, muscles coiled. Dark silhouettes appeared just beyond the narrow gap. Harsh whispers in a language that was not Kiera's drifted in. Weapons clinked. A foot scuffed against stone. My grip on the sidearm tightened, but with only one charge left, any confrontation would be dire. Could we slip away unnoticed? Kiera glanced at me, then pointed upward at a small fissure in the roof of the shelter. It might be just wide enough to climb through, but the climb looked precarious, the rock crumbly, and the slightest sound might alert our pursuers. Still, we had little choice. Soundlessly, we shifted across the shelter, staying low, each step carefully placed. My breath sounded deafening in my own ears. We reached the fissure. Kiera hoisted herself upward, arms and legs gripping the uneven surface with surprising strength. I followed, swallowing fear. The stone threatened to crumble, sending pebbles rattling below. My limbs trembled with effort. A muttered exclamation from behind us, someone had noticed movement. I looked down to see the faint glow of flashlights or torches shining into the hollow. "They're here," I thought, panic rising. With renewed desperation, I forced myself higher. My finger hovered over the sidearm's trigger, but I hesitated. A single shot might stun them, but then we would lose the element of stealth. Kiera reached the top of the fissure and extended a hand for me. I gripped it, and she pulled me onto a narrow ledge. We found ourselves just above the entrance to the cave, on a precarious overhang that circled the escarpment. The wind buffeted us, threatening to knock us off. Below, the intruders had entered the shelter, their voices echoing in the stone chamber. Through the swirl of dust, I caught snatches of conversation. They spoke in standard, but with a guttural accent. "This is the place. Must have come through here. Not far." Another voice responded, sharper. "Find them. Take the cargo if you can. If not, kill them and strip the ship." My stomach nodded. Mercenaries. Possibly a small band or scouting party. I recognized the callous intonation of those who cared only for profit. They must have detected my distress signal or stumbled upon my crash site. Either way, these men were lethal and clearly not interested in my well-being. Kiera motioned for silence, pressing herself flat against the rock. I followed suit. Slowly, we inched our way along the ledge. One misstep would send us plummeting. Below, the mercenaries rummaged, cursing when they discovered the place empty. An ominous hush descended, then a burst of furious shouting. They must have found Kiera's stash of supplies, perhaps discovered footprints, or something that proved we had been there recently. My pulse throbbed in my ears. Kiera pointed ahead. The ledge curved around a bend that, with any luck, would lead us to safety on the far side of the escarpment. We crept carefully. At times, the rock was so narrow that I had to press my entire body against it, inching forward. The desert wind tugged at me, sending grains of sand stinging into my face. Still, we advanced, hearts pounding. When at last we reached more stable ground, we dropped onto a small plateau overlooking the surrounding dunes. From here, the vantage revealed a labyrinth of rocky ridges. If we navigated them well, we might vanish from the mercenaries' line of sight entirely. Yet I saw no simple path. Kiera seemed to sense my hesitation. She tapped my shoulder and pointed to an outcropping shaped like a half-moon to the east. I nodded, trusting her. We set off at a swift pace, bent low. The adrenaline burned in my veins. My mind spun with questions. Who were these mercenaries exactly? How did Kiera figure into all this? And what was the significance of that strange artifact, now tucked into my belt pouch? As the day wore on, the sun hammered us with merciless fury. We pressed through the rocky maze, climbing, sliding, doing our best to remain unseen. Every now and then, we heard distant shouts and curses echo across the stone walls, signs our pursuers were combing the area. My mouth was parched, and I swallowed the last of the water we carried. Desperate as the situation was, a spark of resolve lit my spirit. That sealed cargo back at the wreckage was crucial, not just for a payday, but for the frontier colony's survival. I owed it to them and to myself to fight for it. Kiera, for reasons I could not fully grasp, seemed equally determined that these intruders not claim the planet for themselves. And so we fled onward, with only the desert wind to bear witness to our struggle. Nightfall brought a serene, starlit canopy overhead, cold in its brilliance. Ferran's moon, if it could be called, that was a fractured chunk of rock that cast pale, uneven light across the dunes. Kiera and I found a narrow ravine where we could shelter, lighting only a small, concealed fire to keep warm. Each gust of wind carried the potential sound of boots on rock, so we remained on edge. In the flickering glow of the campfire, I finally had a chance to examine the carved stone artifact more closely. Its luminescence was faint, rhythmic, as if it resonated with some internal energy. Kiera watched me intently, and when I looked up, her gaze bore an urgency that I could not translate into words. She reached for the stone, tapped its carved lines, and then placed her palm against the ground. Her meaning was cryptic, but I sensed she was saying the stone was connected to Ferran itself. Tentatively, I pressed the artifact to the ground as she indicated. A soft hum vibrated through my hand, a tactile echo. My breath caught. "This planet is alive," I whispered. Kiera nodded. confirming my suspicion that there was more than mere geology at work here. We slept in shifts, though true rest was elusive. My dreams were troubled, shapes dancing in swirling dust, ancient structures rising from shifting dunes, and eyes glowing in the darkness. At times, I thought I heard voices chanting in a forgotten tongue, echoing within my own mind. I awoke shivering, despite the desert's lingering heat. At first light, Kiera woke me. She led the way through a confusing tangle of boulders and gullies, the terrain gradually sloping downward. Eventually, we arrived at a chasm with steep walls. There, a series of steps crude, eroded by time, descended into the darkness below. I inhaled sharply. The steps were too uniform to be natural. Someone, long ago, had carved them. Kiera raised a torch, fashioned from dried brush and resin. The flickering flame cast jumping shadows along the ancient stone, descending step by step. I sensed we were entering a realm untouched for centuries, possibly millennia. My heart pounded with a thrill of discovery, tempered by the knowledge that the mercenaries might still be on our trail. Deeper we went, until daylight was a dim glow far behind us. The torch illuminated walls lined with marking spirals, geometric shapes, and cryptic glyphs. Some glowed faintly, just as the artifact did. The sensation of a gentle hum returned, vibrating in my chest. At last, we reached a wide chamber, half collapsed, strewn with rubble. In the center, an archway of black stone stood. It was intricate, riddled with inscriptions, and a pillar on each side glowed with the same soft luminescence. It took my breath away. Kiera approached the arch with reverence. She gestured for me to place the artifact in a small recess at the base of one pillar. My heart thumped nervously. I crouched and set the triangular stone into the niche. At once, the arch pulsed with light that rippled outward, illuminating the chamber. A soft rush of air stirred, as though something ancient had awakened. A whisper like a voice carried on the wind passed through the chamber. I could not discern words, but the tone felt solemn, expectant. Kiera bowed her head, pressing her hand to the cold floor. Unsure what else to do, I followed suit. My mind churned with possibilities. Had we discovered an alien gateway? A shrine? Some kind of repository of knowledge? Before we could investigate further, an echoing clatter of stones above signaled pursuit. We both tensed. The mercenaries had traced our steps, no doubt. How much time did we have? A shaft of light cut through the darkness near the top of the stairs. Then came voices, overlapping, descending. My hand drifted to my empty sidearm, useless now. Kiera hissed, rising, eyes darting between me and the arch. She made a quick gesture toward the structure, indicating we must do something with it, perhaps activate it further. But how? I stared at the carvings that lined the arch, at the luminous lines pulsing around the artifact's recess. In a moment of desperate intuition, I pressed my palm against the central engraving. A tingling warmth spread through my arm, and I felt a surge of energy flow into the arch. The pillars brightened. The hum crescendoed, resonating through my chest. Overhead, the mercenaries' voices drew closer. Then, in a burst of brilliance, the arch flared with blinding light. I staggered back. When my vision cleared, I saw that the space within the arch was now a swirling veil of pale, opalescent energy. Behind us, a shout. There they are. 5 or 6 figures bounded into the chamber, weapons raised. One stepped forward, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a scar across his brow, brandishing a plasma rifle. "Hand over that artifact," he snarled, "and maybe we'll let you live." Kiera let out a feral snarl of her own. She held only a small stone knife. I could see the flicker of fear in her eyes. We were outmatched. The tall man smirked, glancing at the swirling arch behind us. I had no plan, only a reckless impulse. I seized Kiera's hand and, with a heave, yanked her toward the portal. The mercenaries fired. Bolts of plasma whined past, scorching the stone. One grazed my shoulder, filling the air with the stench of burnt flesh. I hissed in agony. Yet momentum carried us onward, and we flung ourselves into the arch. The swirling energy wrapped around us like icy water, dragging us forward. My vision blurred, my ears rang, and my stomach lurched as though we were tumbling into some vast emptiness. In that moment, I believed we might simply dissolve into the ether. But no. After a heartbeat or 1,000, we stumbled out onto solid ground. The light around us dimmed, and I found myself in another chamber, smaller. The walls inscribed with the same glyphs. Dust drifted in the still air, illuminated by faint shafts of natural light from above. My entire body shook. Beside me, Kiera was doubled over, gasping. We had escaped the mercenaries. But where had we landed? I looked around. A corridor led out of the chamber. The style of the carvings was the same, yet the atmosphere felt different, warmer, perhaps less stale. Gaining my balance, I helped Kiera rise. She gazed around with wide eyes, equally stunned. I murmured, "We're still on Ferran." The question lingered in the silence, unanswered. In the distance, we heard a faint roar of rushing water. Could that be possible in this desert world? My heart hammered with fresh hope. Water meant life. We pressed onward, following the corridor until we reached an exit that opened onto a breathtaking vista, an immense cavern lit by natural skylights. A broad, winding river shimmered below, flanked by lush vegetation that crawled up the rocky walls. Bioluminescent moss clung to the stone, painting the space in hues of green and blue. Never had I imagined such a paradise beneath Ferran's lifeless sands. Kiera stepped forward, stunned. Tears welled in her eyes. Perhaps she had never seen this place, or it was legend among her people. My gaze fell upon ruins perched along the cavern's edge, half-collapsed buildings with curved arches, reminiscent of the style we had just seen. This was a city, or what remained of one, hidden deep beneath the desert. Despite the wonder, a sense of urgency nagged me. The mercenaries might find the portal too, or there might be another route leading them here. We had escaped immediate danger, but the fight was far from over. For now, though, we stood in awe of this hidden sanctuary, a testament to an advanced civilization that once thrived on Ferran, harnessing powers we scarcely understood. A single question echoed in my thoughts. What role had fate cast for me and Kiera in this forgotten realm? We made our way down a winding path carved into the cavern walls, descending toward the river's edge. Bioluminescent flora cast gentle glows, making the descent easier. Kiera remained mesmerized, occasionally brushing her fingers against the glowing moss with childlike wonder. I found it difficult to keep my jaw off the floor. Reaching the water, we knelt to drink. The taste was crisp, cool, so different from the parched dryness above. Relief flooded my limbs. I splashed some on my scorched shoulder, wincing at the sting, but welcoming the cleansing. Kiera knelt beside me, scooping water to her lips. For the first time, I saw her eyes reflect a small spark of joy. Yet we could not remain by the river indefinitely. Across the water, I spotted the silhouettes of ancient buildings, their facades bathed in the bioluminescent glow of the cavern. I pointed, glancing at Kiera, silently asking if we should explore. She gave a hesitant nod. Perhaps she recognized something in their architecture, or maybe she simply shared my curiosity. We found a shallow crossing, stepping carefully on smooth stones beneath the rushing current. The water swirled around our ankles, a welcomed reprieve from the scorching dryness above. On the far side, we climbed a mossy embankment and stood before what appeared to be the entrance to a grand hall. The arch above the door was adorned with the same swirling glyphs. Time had worn them down, but their mystique remained. Inside, we discovered a corridor lined with columns that soared toward a ceiling festooned with pale vines. Broken tiles crunched beneath our boots. Strange murals adorned the walls, depicting figures tall, robed silhouettes with elongated limbs engaged in rituals or scientific endeavors. It was impossible to say which. They seemed to be placing similar triangular artifacts into large machines, or possibly altars, which glowed with light. My mind reeled with the possibilities. Had they harnessed planetary energy for some grand purpose? And if so, why had their civilization fallen? Kiera paused before one mural that showed a robed figure holding up an artifact identical to the one she had given me. The robe being faced an enormous orb, perhaps representing Ferran's sun or the planet's core, while lines of light connected them. Kiera traced her fingers over the lines, her expression a mixture of reverence and sadness. She glanced at me, pointing to the artifact in my belt. I nodded, heart pounding. Suddenly, a faint rumble reverberated through the cavern, shaking loose dust from the ceiling. We froze. Far off, echoes of angry voices reached our ears, unmistakably the mercenaries. Somehow, they had found their way here as well, or else stumbled upon a second passage. Our respite was over. Determination ignited in me. This place was too precious, too vital to surrender to plunderers. The cargo I carried was important, but this ancient sanctuary might hold secrets that could benefit countless worlds if properly understood or be exploited for immense profit by those with darker intent. For Kiera's sake, for Ferran's sake, I could not let that happen. We hurried deeper into the hall, searching for a vantage point or a place to hide. The corridor opened into a vast chamber, reminiscent of a throne room. A central dais rose from the floor, flanked by broken statues of the robed figures. A wide balcony overlooked the underground river. Torches or lamps once might have lined the walls, but now only the faint, phosphorescent glow of the moss illuminated the space. Kneeling behind a fallen column, we listened. The mercenaries' voices drifted closer, echoing from the hallway. My chest tightened. With only a stone knife, Kiera could not stand against armed soldiers, and my sidearm was useless, its charge spent. We needed a plan, some advantage from the environment. As we waited, I noticed runic patterns etched into the dais itself, each line shining faintly. It reminded me of the archway's mechanism. Perhaps this dais was another device. Could it help us somehow? Frantically, I beckoned Kiera over. Together, we examined the carvings. In the center was a hollow, shaped just like the triangular artifact, heart pounding. I pulled the stone from my belt. It glowed softly, warming my hand in pulses that seemed to match my own racing heartbeat. Our pursuers' footsteps approached. Gunmetal scraped on stone. No time for hesitation. I placed the artifact into the hollow in the dais. The lines came alive with sudden brilliance, racing outward like lightning across the floor. A deep hum rose, vibrating the air. Kiera and I staggered back as the dais began to rotate, dust swirling around it. One of the mercenaries burst into the chamber, rifle raised. He shouted, "They're in here!" More followed, weapons at the ready. But then the dais unleashed a flare of light that sent them stumbling backward, shielding their eyes. Kiera let out a fierce cry, emboldened by the phenomenon. The dais crackled with energy, forming a shimmering barrier around its perimeter. I stood, half in awe, half in terror, as arcs of light lashed out, striking columns and scattering sparks. The mercenaries fired, but their bolts seemed to vanish in the swirling haze. One shot ricocheted wildly, striking the ceiling. Chunks of stone rained down. In the chaos, I grabbed Kiera's arm and dashed behind a statue, seeking cover. I risked a glance back at the dais. Something was happening. The swirl of light centered on the artifact, as if channeling the planet's energy. Another crash of stone boomed through the chamber, and I realized the entire place was becoming unstable. The ancient structure groaned, as though it could collapse at any moment. "Fall back!" one of the mercenaries roared, panic edging his voice. But another merc barked an order. "No! We need that device. Go around!" Before they could reorganize, a chunk of the balcony above broke loose, slamming to the floor, blocking their path. Dust and debris filled the air, choking my lungs. Kiera tugged me away, pointing to a side corridor that might serve as an escape. The dais rumbled louder. The swirling barrier seemed to intensify. Then, in a burst of searing light, it exploded outward. I threw myself flat, shielding Kiera with my body, An ear-splitting crack deafened me. A wave of force lifted us, slamming us against the stone floor. My thoughts spun in confusion. When the dust settled and my ears stopped ringing, I dared to open my eyes. The dais was dark, the artifact's light extinguished. The entire structure rent, as if by a violent storm. The mercenaries lay scattered around the chamber, some groaning, some silent. A gaping hole had opened in the floor, revealing an even deeper void below. My heart lurched. I spotted movement near the collapsed balcony. The tall mercenary leader pulling himself upright, rifle at the ready. Rage twisted his features. He glared at me and Kiera, determined to complete his mission despite the chaos. A swirl of dust masked his approach, but I saw him raise his weapon, saw his finger tighten on the trigger. An anguished roar tore from my throat, unable to watch her suffer. I flung myself between Kiera and the impending shot. My arms lifted in a futile gesture of defense. But before the trigger could be pulled, the floor collapsed beneath the mercenary. With a horrifying shriek, he tumbled into the darkness below, the echo of his fall trailing off. A moment later, a low rumble sounded as the structure shifted again. Stunned, I helped Kiera to her feet. She clutched my arm, trembling. The dais was shattered, the artifact lost among the rubble. We coughed in the thick dust, searching for an exit. The entire cavern threatened to cave in on us. With no other option, we stumbled toward the side corridor, hoping it led to safety. We ran, ignoring our injuries. The corridor snaked deeper into the ruins, occasionally branching off into smaller chambers. Each tremor that rocked the place made my heart skip. Broken pillars and shattered statues littered our way. Somehow, we found a ramp leading upward. We climbed, breath ragged, until finally we emerged onto a ledge, overlooking the subterranean river again. Far below, the waters churned with debris. Behind us, the once majestic hall collapsed in on itself, sending up clouds of dust and scattering shards of masonry. The cataclysmic roar reverberated through the cavern, an end to centuries of silent grandeur. My chest heaved with sorrow for the loss of such ancient wonders, though I knew some parts of the ruins might still remain intact, hidden elsewhere in Ferran's depths. We trudged along the ledge, grappling with the question of what to do next. Without the artifact, we had lost the one key that might have unlocked Ferran's deeper mysteries, or given us the power to repel the mercenaries. Yet we were alive, and the band that pursued us had taken heavy losses. Summoning courage, I squeezed Kiera's hand. Her gaze, while fatigued, held resolve. Together, we pressed on, forging a path along the cavern's perimeter, determined to find a way to save ourselves and perhaps this planet from further harm. By the time we exited the cavern's hidden recesses into open daylight, I scarcely believed my eyes. We stood atop a rugged ridge that overlooked a valley of swirling sand. The desert was no less hostile, but after the cramped darkness of the ruins, the open air felt oddly liberating. Smoke curled in the distance, black and ominous. My heart lurched. It was the sight of my crashed ship. Something stirred within me, a longing to secure the cargo. If the mercenaries had found it, the consequences could be dire. Kiera seemed to understand my resolve without words. We picked our way down the ridge, using boulders and low outcroppings as cover. Occasionally, I scanned the skies, half expecting to see a dropship or cruiser overhead. But the sky remained barren, except for the dust-laden clouds that perpetually haunted Ferran's atmosphere. As we approached the crash site from a hidden angle, I glimpsed figures moving around the wreckage. Several men, dressed in the same patchwork armor as the mercenaries in the ruins, combed the area. A makeshift camp had been established, with a flickering generator powering portable lights. They had clearly begun dismantling the freighter. My stomach tightened in rage and fear. I counted at least 4 armed guards visible. There could be more inside. The cargo container, pried open, stood near the entrance. My chest constricted. The prototypes, whatever advanced technology or terraforming modules they contained, might already be in enemy hands. With no weapon but a stone knife, Kiera could do little against multiple foes. My sidearm was drained. We needed a different approach. As I weighed desperate ideas, a faint hum drifted from the west. My ears perked. A small vehicle, an air skimmer, glided over a distant dune. It bore the insignia of a corporate colony. On board stood 3 figures, each armed, but they didn't look like mercenaries. They wore sturdier gear, with official emblems. Could it be an official patrol or rescue team responding to my distress call? The mercenaries at the wreckage noticed as well, shouting alarms. Weapons pivoted. The air skimmer halted, and the 3 new arrivals crouched behind its metal rim, returning fire. A firefight erupted, plasma bolts crisscrossing the desert clearing. Sparks scattered over the twisted hull of my freighter. I signaled to Kiera. We inched closer, using the chaos to our advantage, under normal circumstances. I might have shouted to identify myself to these newcomers, but the volley of laser fire made that suicidal. Instead, we crept around the perimeter, picking our moment. With their attention split between us and the newly arrived patrol, the mercenaries broke formation. I spotted an opening and dashed toward the broken cargo door, beckoning Kiera behind me. Shots sizzled past. My heart hammered. Inside, the freighter's interior was strewn with debris. The hold was partly dismantled. Sparks flew from severed conduits. The cargo container, forcibly opened, stood at the far end. 2 mercenaries rummaged through it, their curses audible. I pressed against a wall, my back clammy with sweat. My mind raced. If I could disrupt them, perhaps cause a distraction, while the patrol engaged the rest, I might snatch back the prototypes. Glancing around, I spotted a discarded energy rifle, presumably left behind by a wounded or dead mercenary. I crawled across the floor, heart pounding in my throat. One of the men by the container spun at the last moment, eyes wide. He raised his weapon. I rolled behind a chunk of plating. Bolts sizzled, chewing into the metal. My ears rang. Kiera, seizing the opportunity, sprang from the shadows with inhuman speed, tackling the second mercenary. She stabbed with her knife once, twice subduing him before he could react. A savage growl tore from her throat. The first mercenary shouted, swinging his rifle to bear on Kiera. I lunged, hooking my foot around his ankle, throwing him off balance. He fired wildly into the hull. The blast ricocheted, grazing my leg. Pain seared through me. Ignoring the agony, I wrenched his weapon upward. Kiera drove her knee into his chest. He collapsed, gasping. With a surge of adrenaline, I tore the rifle from his grip and slammed the butt against his head. He went limp. I fell back, clutching my leg, breath ragged. Kiera crouched beside me, concern in her gaze. Blood streamed from the burn, but I was still functional. "We have to move," I gasped. She nodded, retrieving the mercenary's rifle and handing it to me. Now, at least, I was armed. We hastened to the cargo container. Inside, the prototypes lay half exposed, sleek, cylindrical devices. By the look of it, the mercenaries had removed protective casings, fiddling to see if they could be powered. I recognized the brand of a major terraforming corporation, specialized in forging artificial ecosystems in harsh environs. If the mercenaries recognized the value, they might have planned to ransom them off or sell them to the highest bidder. Footsteps thundered behind us. Another mercenary had entered. I spun, rifle raised, firing a short burst. The recoil pummeled my shoulder, but the shots found their mark. He dropped, a shriek on his lips. My stomach churned. Violence had never been my preference, but survival left little choice. Outside, the firefight continued. The air skimmer's engines howled, peering out through a gap in the hull. I saw the mercenaries faltering against the better-armed patrol. One of the patrol members lobbed a stun grenade, sending up a brilliant flash that toppled 2 mercenaries. The tide was turning. I turned to Kiera. "We need to let them know we're friendly," I said, though I doubted she understood my exact words. Still, she seemed to grasp the intent. We made our way out, weapons lowered, hoping to signal that we posed no threat. The patrol saw us and tensed. but I waved a hand, calling above the din, "Friendlies! I'm Marcus Torellis' ship crashed. Cargo stolen. We're not with these mercenaries." A woman wearing a pilot's visor shouted back, "Down on the ground!" She kept her rifle trained on us. My heart sank, but I complied. Kiera hesitated, baring her teeth uncertainly. I placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, urging her to follow suit. Slowly, we knelt. Once the patrol had subdued the remaining mercenaries, some had fled. Others lay unconscious. They advanced, guns at the ready. The woman leading them kept her weapon leveled at me but spared a quick glance at the cargo container. "That yours?" I nodded stiffly. "Transporter contract. Terraforming prototypes. I never planned on them ending up in the hands of bandits." She exchanged looks with her comrades, then gestured for me to stand. "We picked up your weak distress pulse. Came to check it out." By the time we arrived, these mercs had set up shop. "We're from the Oasis colony. Name's Lieutenant Draven." Relief spilled through me. "Thank you, Lieutenant," I said, forcing a calm tone despite the pain in my leg. "I appreciate the rescue." "This is Kiera," I added, motioning to my companion, who watched them warily. "She saved me out here." I struggled to explain the magnitude of that statement. Draven nodded, sizing Kiera up. "Is she from Ferran?" "She's a native, I think," I said. "But there's more. There's something else here, ancient ruins, advanced technology. The mercenaries were after it." Her expression hardened. "We suspected something like that. There have been rumors about Ferran's hidden resources, even legends of an advanced civilization. Corporate heads want a piece of it, and scum like these mercenaries smell profit." She turned to her fellow patrol members. "Secure the area. We'll radio for a shuttle to collect the cargo. Might net us a decent bonus." One of them nodded, stepping away to radio their base. I wanted to protest that we still had no idea the scope of what lay under Ferran's sands. But at the same time, I felt a wave of exhaustion. The last few days had been a maelstrom of survival, discovery, and conflict. At least for now, the prototypes and I were safe. Kiera, however, eyed the newcomers with distrust. I sensed her tension, the way she hovered close to me, as though uncertain if these strangers were truly allies. She had reason to be cautious. Too many had already come to this land with ill intentions. Despite the relief of rescue, an uneasiness settled over me. Kiera and I had glimpsed wonders deeper beneath the planet's surface. The crashed dais, the swirling archway, the bizarre energies. These were not trifles to be scooped up by off-world corporations. Ferran was alive, ancient, and possibly volatile. Whatever slumbered here, it deserved respect. The sun dipped low over the horizon, painting the desert in brilliant oranges. Lieutenant Draven led us to the air skimmer, offering medical assistance. Kiera recoiled at their instruments, so I reassured her it was to help. While they treated my leg wound, Draven asked me to recount the events that had led to this moment. I spoke carefully, omitting certain details about the artifact, particularly that it had once opened a portal. I wasn't certain how she might react if she knew the full extent of Ferran's hidden powers. Eventually, the roar of engines approached. A larger shuttle emerged from behind a ridge, descending in a cloud of dust. Draven and her team waved it in. "Let's get those prototypes on board," Draven said. "Then we'll talk about your next steps." Torellis. A swirl of thoughts passed through my mind. The cargo might be safe now, but what about Kiera? Would she stay behind? Come with me. And what of the secrets buried in Ferran's depths? A pang of protectiveness for the planet welled inside me, surprising in its intensity. As the shuttle touched down, I glanced at Kiera. She met my gaze, silent as ever. Yet in her amber eyes, I read an unspoken vow. We were in this together. Whether that meant saving Ferran from reckless exploitation or confronting the next wave of greedy invaders. Our alliance was forged in blood and dust, tested by ancient forces beyond our reckoning. And our journey, it seemed, was just beginning. The Oasis colony shuttle carried us across Ferran's deserts to a modular outpost set along the banks of a scalding, shallow sea. The colony itself was a network of prefabricated domes and corridors, shimmering with heat distortion. Coolant vents hissed to keep the interior habitable, a stark contrast to the planet's punishing environment. Lieutenant Draven escorted us to the outpost's command building, an imposing structure with thick walls and blast doors. Inside, the temperature was mercifully regulated. Though the air smelled recycled, guards patrolled the corridors, eyeing Kiera warily as we passed. I felt her grip on my arm tighten. Everything about this place must have seemed alien to her. We were directed into a small briefing room. Moments later, a middle-aged man in a crisp uniform entered. His name badge read Commander Altan. He eyed me, then Kiera, with calculated curiosity before sitting at the table opposite us. "I've reviewed Lieutenant Draven's report," Altan began, voice flat. "Your Marcus Torellis, an independent transporter, crashed here with critical prototypes. And this, local guided you. Correct." I nodded, swallowing a sudden knot in my throat. "Yes, sir. Without her help, I wouldn't have survived." Altan folded his hands, gaze intense. "The Oasis colony is authorized to salvage wrecks on Ferran and secure valuable technology. We're also tasked with protecting corporate interests in the region. However, your mention of ancient ruins suggests there may be a larger opportunity, one we cannot ignore." I shifted uneasily in my seat. "I'm just a courier, Commander. I completed my contract by getting the prototypes here. But the ruins, they're not just some random site to be plundered. There's something more. This planet has a life, an energy." Alton's eyebrows rose cynically. "I appreciate your romantic notions, Torellis, but from the corporation's perspective, any advanced technology here must be studied, and if feasible, harnessed." Kiera's posture stiffened. She might not speak standard, but she sensed the tension. I reached for her hand under the table, offering silent reassurance. "We'll arrange your payment for delivering the prototypes," Alton continued in a dismissive tone. "As for the local, we'll see if there's a place for her in the colony, maybe as a guide. We can discuss further arrangements after we've established a proper expedition to the ruins." A swirl of emotions churned within me. On the one hand, I had nearly died transporting those prototypes, and fair compensation was tempting. On the other, the idea of a corporate expedition rummaging through Ferran's secrets without regard for the planet's sanctity or Kiera's culture made me uneasy. Glancing at Kiera, I saw her eyes dart around the room, apprehensive. She was a creature of the sands, a guardian of Ferran, and the corporate approach might trample everything she held dear. Commander Altan seemed to sense my hesitation. "I understand your concerns," he said, though his tone was more mechanical than empathetic. "We do have ethical protocols for archaeological sites. If these ruins are significant, we'll involve qualified teams." The memory of the dais destruction flashed through my mind. Qualified teams or not. The technology down there is powerful, maybe dangerously so. If you go in unprepared, you risk catastrophic events. We can't treat it like any other salvage. Alton tapped a stylus against the table. "Which is why we'll recruit experts from off-world. Now, if that's all, Lieutenant Draven will show you to your quarters. We'll need your official statement later." I saw the conversation was over in his eyes. He had plans in motion, unstoppable. With a curt nod, I rose, guiding Kiera out. Lieutenant Draven, waiting outside, gave me a tired look. "Come on, I'll take you to a temporary room." She led us down a corridor, the sterile lighting creating an unnatural hum. At a heavy door, she paused. "Look, Torellis, I know your friend doesn't belong behind these walls, but it's safer than letting her roam. Some folks here, well, they're not big on outsiders." I suppressed a grimace. "We'll manage," I said, stepping into the small quarters. Draven handed me a keycard, then left us to tend her duties. The door slid shut with a pneumatic hiss. The room was cramped, 2 bunks, a wash station, and a small table. Kiera looked around, perplexed by the machinery. The dull metal surfaces. She hovered near me, uneasy. I sank onto a bunk, exhaling. My leg ached from the graze, though medics had patched it up. "We're stuck in a corporate outpost on a planet with hidden powers," I murmured, speaking aloud despite her not understanding the words. "They want to exploit Ferran, and I'm not sure how we can stop them." Kiera's gentle hand on my shoulder stopped my spiral of worry. She murmured something soothing in her language. Her eyes spoke comfort. "We are not alone. Even if we lacked a shared tongue, we had a bond forged in survival. That had to mean something." I closed my eyes, exhaustion claiming me. Soon, I drifted into an uneasy sleep. Dreams swirled with the memory of that archway and the dais. The artifact glowed, the planet's pulse a steady thrum in my mind. Then came images of mercenaries blasting away sacred relics, and a shadowy silhouette of Kiera, standing defiant. I awoke with a gasp, heart pounding, to find her watching over me, concerned. Hours or days passed in a blur. My wound healed slowly, and Kiera wandered the corridors in tense silence, occasionally exchanging uncertain glances with the colonists. Meanwhile, the outpost prepared an expedition team. Scientists, engineers, corporate officers, they bustled about, assembling gear for exploring the underground ruins. The plan was to depart in a caravan of rovers and cargo crawlers, heavily armed in case of more mercenary interference. Commander Alten approached me one morning in the mess hall, flanked by an older man wearing a data visor. "This is Professor Rowan, an expert in xenoarchaeology. We'd like you to guide us to the location you mentioned." I straightened, bristling. "What about Kiera? She knows this land far better than I do." Alten glanced at Kiera, who sat beside me, picking at a protein ration she found unappealing. "She's welcome, if she cooperates." Professor Rowan's gaze lingered on her. A native guide would be invaluable. Her insights could save us weeks of blind searching. I glanced at Kiera, meeting her eyes. She tilted her head, picking up on the tension, but not the words. With slow, deliberate gestures, I tried to convey what was happening. These people wanted to go back to the ruins. She stiffened, recalling the collapse and the violence. At length, she nodded, though fear flickered in her eyes. I saw a steely resolve. She would rather be there to protect the sacred sites than leave them to corporate strangers. So, I nodded to Altan. "We'll go. Under one condition. You respect the ruins. No wanton destruction for profit." Altan sighed, fighting a smirk. "We're not marauders, Torellis. The corporation has strict rules. You'll see." I wondered if that was true, or if bureaucratic words would crumble under pressure from investors. Regardless, I had little choice if I wanted to keep Kiera safe and ensure Ferran's mysteries weren't trampled. The expedition would depart at dawn the next day. As we turned to leave, Rowan reached out. "Thank you," he said softly, genuine excitement in his eyes. "I've waited my whole career to find a place like this." I mustered a smile, though unease churned inside me. Tomorrow, we would return to Ferran's hidden depths. This time, it wouldn't be just me and Kiera, but a convoy of corporate explorers, armed and eager, ready to claim whatever secrets we unearth. Little did they know that Ferran herself might not be so willing to submit. The morning sun found us assembled at the outpost gates. A line of rugged rovers and cargo haulers stretched across the desert plain, each vehicle bristling with scanning equipment and weaponry. Men and women in corporate-issued uniforms hurried to secure supplies, sealed crates of rations, crates of sensor drones, portable excavation tools, energy shields. Professor Rowan fussed over a mobile lab station, double-checking readouts. Kiera and I stood at the edge, feeling the hum of engines vibrate through the dust. Lieutenant Draven approached, wearing desert-ready armor. "I'm assigned to oversee security," she explained, though her tone was more resigned than thrilled. "We'll keep the route clear of mercenaries." I appreciated her presence. Draven, at least, had shown some measure of fairness. My eyes drifted to Kiera, who stared at the rovers, ears keen on every mechanical whir and beep. She carried only her stone knife and a makeshift pack of supplies. For a moment, I wished we could simply vanish into the dunes, free of corporate agendas. to live in harmony with Ferran's secrets. But the time for that had passed. Commander Alton raised an arm, signaling the caravan to move out. Engines revved, wheels churning sand. The column stretched onward, forging a path across the desert toward the coordinates I had provided approximately, where Kiera and I had discovered the portal leading to the hidden underground realm. The journey took hours under the punishing sun. Drones buzzed overhead, scanning for threats. Occasionally, the wind whipped up fierce dust devils, forcing the caravan to slow. We traveled in uneasy silence, each consumed by private thoughts. Beside me in our rover, Professor Rowan analyzed sensor readings, muttering about subterranean anomalies. Kiera watched the horizon, lips parted, her posture tense. At last, we reached the escarpment where the secret cleft once led us to Kiera's sanctuary. Now it was surrounded by crumbled rock, the aftermath of the recent collapse. A hush fell over the team. Several scientists hopped out, scanning the area with handheld devices. Rowan frowned at the readout. Massive subsidence, he murmured, likely connected to deeper chambers. We'll need to find another entry. Nearby, Kiera touched the rock face, as if sensing a pathway beyond. She beckoned me, and I followed her around a bend. Loose stones clattered underfoot. Eventually, she found a narrow crevice, partially hidden by an overhang. With a few gestures and murmured words, she led me inside. My eyes widened. This was another entrance, perhaps one used long ago. I called out to Draven and Rowan, urging them to follow. Soon, a group of us squeezed through, flashlights illuminating the darkness within. It led to a winding corridor, reminiscent of the path we had taken before. Hieroglyphic markings shimmered faintly on the walls. Rowan's excitement was palpable. Incredible, he whispered, snapping pictures with a handheld scanner. We descended carefully, mindful of unstable floors. The path opened into a cavern that soared overhead, though not as large as the one with the river. Stalagmites and stalactites glimmered with mineral deposits. Kiera pressed on, ignoring the wonders around her. Driven by a sense of purpose, she guided us along a ledge that overlooked a deeper pit. The smell of damp earth and ancient stone filled the air. After a while, the corridor ended in a tall, arching gateway carved with swirling patterns. It was reminiscent of the portal arch, but not identical. Professor Rowan gasped at the sight, shining his flashlight over the inscriptions. These are beyond anything we've discovered on Ferran, he breathed. Such sophistication! Commander Altan, trailing the group with armed guards, eyed the gateway skeptically. Is this our main objective, Rowan? Or is there a bigger prize deeper in? Rowan's face shone with curiosity. Difficult to say. It could be part of a more extensive network. We'll set up a base camp here and proceed slowly. He beckoned me closer. Marcus, can you see any sign of that artifact you mentioned? Or a slot like the dais? I stepped forward, remembering how the dais had glowed. We lost the artifact in the collapse, I admitted. But the planet's power might still be accessible. My hand drifted to the carved lines on the stone gateway, feeling a faint vibration. There's energy here. Kiera felt it before. Kiera approached, pressing her palm against the carvings. She closed her eyes, face solemn, as if listening. Then, with a decisive motion, she pulled away and pointed down a side passage, indicating we should continue deeper. Anxiety twisted in my gut. More wonders, more dangers. Alton approved a small reconnaissance team to follow Kiera, myself, Rowan, Draven, and 2 guards with heavy rifles. The rest set up camp, erecting portable lights and placing sensor arrays. The corridor Kiera led us through was narrow, forcing us to walk single file. Our footsteps echoed in the gloom. My heart thudded heavily. We came to a chamber whose walls were lined with cubical recesses, each containing an ancient container or device. Dust coated everything, though the faint lines of Ferran's luminescence crawled along the floor. Rowan stepped closer to one recess, carefully brushing away centuries of dirt. His eyes widened. These are data crystals, he whispered in awe. Some kind of repository of knowledge. Commander Alton, forging to the front, seemed more interested in potential riches. Anything valuable, Rowan's response was immediate. It's invaluable from a research standpoint. The data stored here could revolutionize how we understand alien civilizations and technology. I knelt beside another recess, drawn by a faint glow. Within lay a small object shaped like a cylinder, etched with swirling patterns reminiscent of the artifact. I hesitated, glancing at Kiera. She nodded for me to pick it up. It was surprisingly light, humming with dormant power, a potential key to Ferran's secrets. Meanwhile, Draven and the guards kept watch. We should keep moving. We're exposed here if the mercenaries track us, she warned. Alton grunted agreement, though Rowan fussed, wanting to examine the chamber further. Reluctantly, we pressed on, guided by Kiera's intuition. The corridor descended in twisting steps, until at last we came upon a massive double door carved from obsidian like stone. Hieroglyphs traced every inch. Some showed robed figures guiding beams of light into mechanical structures. Others showed swirling shapes that might have depicted cosmic energies. My mouth went dry. Kiera placed her hands on the door, her shoulders tensed, and she let out a soft, keening sound, as if sensing an overwhelming presence. I, too, felt an eerie hum. Rowan whispered, "This might be a central vault where they stored their most precious technology." Alton signaled the guards to push forward, but Draven placed a hand on his shoulder. "Sir, caution. We don't know what's inside." He shrugged off her warning. "We're not leaving empty-handed after coming this far. Torellis, see if that cylinder you found can open it." A pang of dread shot through me. We should be careful. Some doors are meant to stay closed. But Alton's glare brooked no argument. With trembling hands, I approached the door. Sure enough, there was a cylindrical socket near its center, carved with patterns that matched the device in my grip. I gently fitted it inside. A soft click reverberated. The glyphs on the door sparkled to life, swirling with the same pale luminescence that marked Ferran's underground passages. The door rumbled, slowly sliding aside. Dust cascaded from above. A gust of stale air rushed out, carrying a sense of ancient gravity. We peered into the darkness beyond, flashlights cutting beams into the gloom. What lay inside was both breathtaking and terrifying. Rows of strange apparatus filled an enormous vault, like an alien laboratory. Translucent tubes lined the walls, connected by shimmering conduits. Some tubes glowed faintly with swirling liquid. Others were cracked, their contents dried. In the center stood a platform topped with an intricate contraption, a spire of black metal, ringed with the triangular symbols we had grown familiar with. Rowan nearly dropped his flashlight. Good heavens! An entire technological array. This is more advanced than anything in the known galaxy. Alton's eyes gleamed with greed. This is beyond artifact. We're talking unstoppable resource. Potential. If we harness it, the corporation. He was cut off by a rumble. The spire glowed, lines of light flowing across the floor. My heart jumped. Kiera tensed. The planet's power, awakened by our intrusion, started to hum. I recalled how the dais had erupted in destructive energy. This might be an even greater danger. "Everybody back!" I shouted. Draven cursed, grabbing Alton's arm. The floor shook. Metallic shrieks echoed through the vault. The tubes of liquid hissed, some cracking under strain. A wave of luminous mist spread, making my hair stand on end as static electricity danced across my skin. Kiera let out a sharp cry, stumbling toward the spire, as if compelled by a force beyond her control. Instinct took over, and I lunged to catch her. Her body shook, eyes rolling back. Panic hammered in my veins. Rowan and Draven shouted, trying to pull us away. Outside, the entire chamber quaked. Chunks of the ceiling rained down. The spire's glow intensified. In desperation, I spotted an engraved console near the platform, reminiscent of the dais. Perhaps it controlled the energy flow. Without thinking, I raced to it, ignoring the falling debris. My hands flew over the symbols. I pressed them in a sequence that felt oddly natural. Guided by some unearthly intuition, a blinding flash erupted. I cried out, shielding my face. Then the trembling subsided, replaced by an intense stillness. I opened my eyes. The spire had dimmed, though faint arcs of energy still crackled. Kiera lay on the ground, breathing but unresponsive. My heart clenched. What the hell was that? Alton gasped, voice laced with equal parts awe and terror. Rowan knelt beside Kiera, checking her pulse. She's alive, he said breathlessly. But something connected with her. I cradled her head, murmuring her name. Slowly, she stirred, eyes fluttering open. In them, I saw a distant light, as though she beheld something far beyond this chamber. Finally, she whispered words in her language, voice trembling. Athen, Ferran, Siro. She repeated them, looking at me imploringly. Rowan said softly, "We need to get her somewhere safe. This place is unstable. The entire planet might be reacting to us now." Alton looked around at the technology, frustration etched in his face. "We can't just leave all this behind. The corporation needs." Draven rounded on him. "Sir, if we stay, we could all die. Look at the cracks forming. This structure won't hold." Even as she spoke, a low groan emanated from the spire, and cracks webbed across the vault floor. Slabs of stone crashed down from overhead. We had no choice. Alton cursed but motioned to retreat. The guards helped Rowan and me carry Kiera toward the exit. We stumbled back through the double doors, the cylinder device still embedded. The corridor behind us rumbled, threatening to collapse. Rocks tumbled from the ceiling in thick clouds of dust. "Move!" Draven roared. At a breathless sprint, we fled. The labyrinths of the ruins reverberated with the planet's agitation. We reached the surface, diving away from the entrance just as the entire escarpment caved inward, swallowing the corridor behind us. A plume of dust rose, blotting out the sun, panting, bruised. We collapsed in the sand. The rest of the expedition team rushed over, wide-eyed. What happened? We lost comm signals. The ground started shaking, someone cried. Alton glared at me, then Rowan, then at the collapsed ruins, fury dancing in his eyes. But no words would undo what had transpired. We had unleashed powers we barely understood, and Ferran had answered with force. Kiera lay in my arms, her breathing returning to normal, though she still trembled. I stroked her hair, relief mixing with dread. This planet would not yield its secrets so easily. Whoever tried to claim them might face calamity, and we, Kiera and I, seemed bound by the planet's will, whether we liked it or not. Back at the makeshift base camp, we regrouped in tense silence. The outpost team scrambled to gather readings from the quake that nearly buried us. One geologist stammered about massive tectonic shifts, aligning suspiciously with the spire's activation. Another read energy spikes that defied conventional science. Kiera eventually, roused. Though she seemed distant, haunted by a new awareness. She gazed at me, mouth opening as if to speak, but only fragments of her language emerged. I yearned to understand her, to ease the turmoil I saw swirling in her eyes. Professor Rowan, bruised and shaken, cornered me. "The console when you touched it. You seemed to shut down the catastrophic reaction. How did you know what sequence to press?" I rubbed my temples. I didn't. Something guided me. Call it intuition. Or maybe I tapped into a memory from the planet itself. I felt connected. Alton overheard, scoffing. Sentimental nonsense. "We need tangible data, not mysticism," Rowan sighed. "Commander, with due respect, you saw what happened. Our normal logic can't explain it. This civilization harnessed energies beyond our current grasp. It's possible Ferran itself is a living biosphere with a symbiotic link to these constructs." Kiera, leaning against a crate, suddenly spoke up. Her voice wavered, but her tone was resolute. She repeated the strange words from the spire, glancing at me with an almost pleading expression. Then, in halting attempts at standard, she managed. "Ferran, speak. Kiera, link." My eyes widened. I recalled the artifact, the dais, the spire. Something had bridged the gap between Kiera's mind and the planet's hidden systems. She was the conduit, and by extension, I had become part of it. A wave of understanding crashed through me. She's trying to say the planet is speaking through her, I murmured, awestruck. Alton stiffened. If that's true, maybe we can use her connection. She could lead us to other sites, safer sites we can exploit. A cold anger surged through me. She's not a tool. If anything, she's the planet's protector. You can't just exploit that connection. We argued in circles, tension crackling in the stifling heat. Eventually, Draven stepped between us. Commander, the quake compromised the structure. We won't be excavating anything soon. Suggest we return to base and regroup. Alton locked his jaw, then relented with a curt nod. Fine, but I want all data archived. We'll replan once we have reinforcements and more advanced equipment. Rowan glanced at Kiera. What about her? I placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. She comes with me. We started this together. We'll see it through. Kiera's fingers brushed mine, and I sensed her agreement. Whatever lay ahead, we would face it side by side. The desert winds picked up, swirling dust around us as if Ferran herself were listening. Days melded into weeks. At the Orasis outpost, Doc Corporate experts arrived, hungry for a piece of the newly unveiled mysteries. A sense of impending frenzy hung in the air. Commanders, scientists, financiers, they all poured in, each with their own agenda. Security doubled, anticipating further mercenary raids. Kiera and I watched it all with growing unease. She had slowly begun to speak more words in broken standard, thanks to daily interactions and my eager efforts to teach her. Still, the deeper expressions of her thoughts remained beyond my grasp. Meanwhile, the link she possessed with Ferran weighed on her. She woke some nights trembling, murmuring about stirrings in the planet's core, about energies roiling beneath the sands. One evening, Rowan found me in the outpost courtyard. I was helping Kiera feed a domesticated sand lizard, a local creature the colonists kept as a pest control pet. She found it fascinating, gently stroking its scales. Rowan pulled me aside. Marcus, I fear for her safety if Alton's plan proceeds. He's requested orbital shipments of heavy excavation machines and drilling rigs. That kind of operation could upset Ferran's stability. My stomach clenched. I've seen what a small activation can do. If they drill indiscriminately, they might provoke a cataclysm. Rowan nodded gravely. Or even if there's no immediate catastrophe, they'll tear through ancient sites like they're strip mines. The cultural and scientific losses would be incalculable. I glanced at Kiera. She was no mere onlooker. She was Ferran's child, bound to the planet's secrets. My voice sank. We have to convince Alton and the corporate board to back down. He spread his hands in despair. I've tried reason. They only see potential super tech. They've set up a formal hearing tomorrow with the board representatives. They'll decide the scale of the operation. Steeling myself, I nodded. We'll speak at that hearing. Kiera too. If she can manage, they must understand the risk. In the morning, the outpost auditorium filled with tension. Corporate directors appeared on holoscreens, while local officers, scientists, and security crowded the seats. Commander Altan presented a slideshow of the extraction plan, touting possible breakthroughs in energy generation, terraforming enhancements, and even weaponization. My blood boiled at that last mention. Professor Rowan gave a measured plea for caution, citing potential hazards to planetary stability. The board members, however, seemed unimpressed. Their pointed questions revolved around profit margins and timetables. Draven, for her part, reminded them that mercenaries still prowled the region, complicating large-scale operations. Finally, they called me and Kiera forward. Alton's lip curled, sensing an adversarial stance. I cleared my throat. I've witnessed Ferran's power firsthand. We activated something in those ruins that nearly destroyed us. If we proceed blindly, we risk not just losing the planet's treasures, but unleashing forces we can't control. A board member, flickering on a holoscreen, replied, Mr. Torellis, we respect your experience, but with proper equipment and protocols, we can mitigate risks. I took a steadying breath, turning to Kiera. She stepped forward, eyes fierce yet anxious. Ferran is alive, she began, voice halting. Not just rock or dust. It. Watch. She pressed her hand to her chest, then pounded the table for emphasis. If we hurt it, fight back. A wave of awkward silence. One board member coughed, another frowned. Then the debate resumed, with corporate voices casting doubt or claiming new technology would tame Ferran. Trembling with frustration, I cut in. You haven't seen what we saw. This planet isn't just soil to drill. It's woven with an ancient intelligence. If you force your way in, you risk catastrophic backlash. Do you want another collapsed vault? Another unstoppable quake? Alton fired back. That was an isolated incident, triggered by untrained meddling. With experts, we can avoid such disasters. The conversation spiraled. Corporate heads argued for controlled exploitation. A few scientists argued for restraint. Security officers worried about mercenaries. Kiera stood by me, her gaze distant, as if listening to a voice unheard by the rest. Finally, she raised her hand in an oddly formal gesture, capturing everyone's attention. In the desert, she said slowly, there is place bigger than ruin, heart. She tapped her chest. Ferran's heart. If you break it, all die. A shiver laced my spine. So there was a deeper epicenter to the planet's energies. The board members looked startled. Some scoffed, but others grew pale. Could it be true? Before we could elaborate, a sharp alarm blared through the outpost. An incoming security alert flashed on the overhead screens. Draven and the other officers snapped to attention. Unidentified ships entering orbit. They're not responding to hails. A voice crackled over the intercom. Alton cursed under his breath. Mercenaries, or a rival corporation. Chaos ensued as everyone rushed to the control center. Kiera and I followed, hearts pounding. The main holo display showed several strike craft descending into Ferran's atmosphere. They're setting down near the old crash site, a technician reported. Big, possibly hired guns with advanced gear. The board members, still on holo, erupted into panicked debate. This was not a trifling raid, but a large-scale incursion. If these newcomers planned to secure the planet's ancient tech before the corporation, it might spark an outright war. Commander Alton turned to me, face grim. Looks like the hearing is over. We're going to defend our stake here, Terrellus. Your local friend can come, but we can't guarantee safety. Kiera's expression hardened with understanding. She nodded resolutely, as did I. Whatever was coming, we'd face it together. Within hours, the new invaders set up a forward base near the wreck of my old ship. Ironically, the same place where this saga began. Drones scouted their forces, heavily armed infantry, mechs for desert terrain, a small shield generator to protect their camp. They wasted no time, dispatching patrols and scanning the region. Judging by their insignia, an interstellar paramilitary group known for dealing in high-stakes salvage, they were formidable. Commander Alton mobilized Oasis's security forces, supported by volunteer militia. Professor Rowan joined an auxiliary science unit, hoping to secure any relics before they fell into hostile hands. Kiera and I stood at the perimeter, tension thrumming. Draven approached with an extra rifle, offering it to me. No sense going unarmed this time, she said softly. I accepted. The board members, safe on their distant worlds or orbiting stations, demanded Alton repel the invaders at any cost. The final catalyst for a confrontation had arrived. Two factions stood on the brink of war over a planet that might exact its own price in blood. Under a blazing midday sun, Oasis forces clashed with the paramilitary group in a violent skirmish. Plasma fire streaked across the dunes. Sand kicked up in frenzied storms. Kiera and I ducked behind a half-buried boulder, returning fire at silhouettes of advancing soldiers. Adrenaline surged as beams hissed overhead. A jarring explosion rocked our position. One of the invaders' mechs unleashed a volley of missiles that blasted through an Oasis rover. Flames licked the air. Screams echoed. I spotted Draven across the battlefield, rallying her squad with desperate shouts. In the swirl of chaos, Kiera grabbed my arm and pointed to the horizon. An ominous tremor rippled under the sand. Ferran was responding again. The planet rumbled, as if agitated by the rampant destruction. Nearby, a paramilitary soldier aimed at Kiera. I fired first, neutralizing him. The brutality of the moment turned my stomach, but I had no time to dwell. Another quake jolted the ground, splitting a dune in half. Soldiers on both sides scrambled to keep their footing. Suddenly, a crack of energy erupted behind the paramilitary lines, a swirling aura reminiscent of the portal we had once passed through. My heart pounded. Could Ferran be opening more gateways? Or was the paramilitary using stolen tech? Blinding flashes of light flared around the battlefield. Plasma bolts from Horus's defenders hammered the invaders' shield. The paramilitary group retaliated with savage efficiency. The air tasted of ozone and fear. Amid the carnage, Kiera pulled me aside, eyes wide. She repeated a word, heart, heart, pointing toward the distance. I realized she meant the planet's core site. This new wave of fighting risked triggering a cataclysm at that heart. Her message was urgent. We had to stop it. But how? Even if we convinced the combatants to back down, the paramilitary wouldn't listen. They wanted to claim Ferran's power. Meanwhile, Horus fought to keep it out of enemy hands, but had no plan to withdraw entirely. Tension ignited a desperate notion in my mind. If we could seal off or deactivate Ferran's central systems, we might quell the planet's fury and remove the prime incentive for these invaders. Yet that meant venturing deeper than ever before into the place Kiera called the heart. Determination steeled me. Over the whine of weapons fire, I told Kiera, "Let's go." She nodded fiercely. We slipped away from the main fighting, scurrying behind ridges of rock. Once we left the lines, the desert stretched before us, empty except for the roiling dust clouds. It would be a perilous journey, but if we remained at the battlefield, we'd only feed the war. We traveled for hours under the scorching sun, guided by Kiera's instincts. The tremors continued sporadically, rattling my bones. Twice. We spotted paramilitary scout drones overhead, but they seemed preoccupied scanning for Horus's positions. We kept our heads low, forging on. As dusk settled, Kiera led us into a region of jagged canyons I'd never seen. Steam vents hissed from cracks in the rock. Strange, glowing crystals protruded in places, reminiscent of the energy lines in the ruins. The hum of Ferran's pulse grew stronger, vibrating under my feet. Eventually, we came upon a monstrous sinkhole, miles wide, at the base of a towering cliff. Red, dish-like glowed from within its depths, painting the sky with an eerie glow. Kiera halted, trembling. She gestured downward, repeating that word again, heart. My stomach clenched. We stood at the threshold of Ferran's most sacred site, where the planet's lifeblood churned. The stench of sulfur wafted from below. The air crackled with static. One misstep and we'd tumble into oblivion. Yet there, at the rim of the sinkhole, a narrow stone ledge descended in a spiral. Kiera began down it, her posture resolute. I followed, fighting vertigo as we wound deeper, each step bringing us closer to a fiery glow that radiated from the chasm's core. Halfway down, a quake nearly knocked us off. Rocks cascaded into the void, vanishing in swirling steam. Heart pounding, we pressed on. As we neared the bottom, the heat intensified, prickling my skin with sweat. Luminescent lines etched the cavern walls, converging into a massive circular platform. In the center of that platform rose a crystalline structure, shaped like a giant spire entwined with organic roots. Pulses of red-orange light coursed through it, in sync with the planet's tremors. Kiera reached the platform first. She exhaled, the atmosphere almost too hot to breathe. Carefully, we stepped onto the ancient stone, approaching the spire. The glow revealed more carvings, depicting robed figures bridging cosmic forces. I realized with a jolt, this was the apex of the entire Ferran network, the unifying node that harnessed the planet's geothermal and possibly psychic energies. but how to calm it, how to stop the planet's mounting rage. Kiera placed her hands on the spire's surface, grimacing as if in pain. The planet's pulse quickened. She looked back at me, tears in her eyes. Her trembling lips formed words. Need, peace. Ferran, hurting. I recalled how I'd interacted with the dais console. Gathering my courage, I placed my hands alongside hers. Instantly, a searing current raced up my arms. My vision blurred. Shapes and lights spun in my mind, memories that weren't mine. Images of Ferran, ages past. A once lush world. Robed figures tending living machines. Then devastation. Something or someone had driven them to vanish, leaving behind these monstrous energies. Now Ferran was wounded anew by war, exploitation. Kiera's voice sounded in my head. Or perhaps it was Ferran speaking through her. Heal or break. In that moment, I understood. If we didn't quell the conflict and show mercy to Ferran, the planet would defend itself with unstoppable force, possibly wiping out all intruders. Could I blame it? I fought for calm, focusing on unity, on the desire to protect rather than destroy. My heart hammered in my chest. The spire flared, resisting, but slowly, as I poured my intent, the rage lessened. The surging glow softened. A wave of relief spread through me. Kiera's shoulders relaxed, tears streaking her dusty cheeks. Yet the sensation of raw power reminded me of a coiled beast. It had not vanished, merely receded. Ferran was waiting, giving us a chance to bring peace or face annihilation. The choice was ours. Exhausted, we sank to our knees. My lungs burned in the oppressive heat. We had done what we could to calm the planet's immediate fury. But unless the fighting stopped above, it might still lash out. Sensing that, we gathered the last of our strength to climb back. Each step up the winding ledge felt like an eternity. Finally, we emerged at the surface, gulping the cool night air. In the distance, flares lit the sky. The battle raged on. We returned to find Oras's forces battered, pinned behind a rocky ridge. The paramilitary invaders advanced with heavy mechs, bombarding the outpost from a distance. Fires blazed across the desert, painting the horizon in a grim orange glow. Commander Altan, battered and bloodied, shouted orders from behind a makeshift barricade. Draven tended to wounded soldiers. Professor Rowan was nowhere in sight. My heart thundered. Had it all come to this, a savage fight for control? Both sides ignorant that the planet itself teetered on the edge of unleashing cataclysm. Kiera and I dropped beside Draven, who stared, stunned to see us. "Where did you two vanish?" she rasped. "It's hell here." Before I could respond, a quake tremor struck, toppling a damaged rover. The ground near the paramilitary lines split open, swallowing a mech with a roar. It was Ferran's warning. Another violent shift could wipe out everything. I bellowed across the lines, voice straining. "Stop the fighting! You're going to doom us all!" In the chaos, my words were lost. Plasma shots streaked overhead. Desperate, Kiera stood atop the rubble, raising her arms. She let out a piercing cry that seemed to cut through the noise. Her figure was illuminated by flickering flames. For a moment, both sides faltered, gazing at the wild Huntress. I seized the lull. "Ferran's heart can destroy us all if we keep this up," I shouted. "You've seen the quakes. One more push could bury us in the sand forever." Commander Altan, half-crouched, glared. "We can't just surrender. They'll slaughter us or seize the planet's tech." On the paramilitary side, a man in heavy armor, presumably their leader, stalked forward. Weapon drawn, "Stand down, Orasis, or we finish this," he shouted. "Finish this and everyone dies," I yelled back. "The planet is fighting back. If you won't believe me, look around. Are your casualties not proof enough?" The ground rumbled again. Another rift opened near the paramilitary lines, spitting steam. Alarmed shouts rose from their ranks. Uncertainty flickered in the leader's eyes. Even if he didn't believe in living planets, the ground collapsing under his troops was hard to ignore. A tense standoff followed. The paramilitary leader barked, Then how do we stop it? This rock is worthless if it kills us all. I glanced at Kiera. She nodded. My chest tightened, but I forced composure. We have to let Ferran rest. That means no drilling, no excavation, no fight. Withdraw, all of us, or face extinction. The echoes of my words lingered over the battlefield. Another quake shook the sand, toppling a ruined rover. That final jolt seemed to break their resolve. The paramilitary drew back, muttering curses. The Oasis defenders, exhausted, lowered their weapons. Amid the swirling dust, an uneasy truce settled. In the flickering gloom, Commander Altan and the paramilitary leader approached, weapons still in hand, but no longer raised. Each man glared, seething with mutual hate and grudging respect for the planet's danger. Kiera stepped between them, as if physically intervening. Her voice trembled with sincerity. Leave Ferran, or respect Ferran. Silence. Then Altan's shoulders slumped in defeat. We can't kill each other if the planet itself has the final say, he grunted. The paramilitary leader swore under his breath, but nodded. A retreat was signaled. The paramilitary started packing up. Oasis reined in their battered forces. The planet's surface, scarred by craters and smoking wrecks, seemed to sigh in relief. In the aftermath, negotiations ensued between the paramilitary group, Oasis, and the corporate board members. The cost of a protracted war, financial and human, proved prohibitive. Evidence of Ferran's destructive potential could no longer be denied. Reluctantly, both sides agreed to withdraw major operations, leaving only a minimal presence for scientific study, much to Rowan's relief. Those scientists with genuine respect for the planet's heritage would continue cautious exploration, abiding by strict guidelines. I found myself numb, battered, yet oddly hopeful. Ferran would live on without large-scale exploitation, at least for now. As for me, the cargo prototypes were delivered. My contract technically fulfilled. The corporation offered me a tidy sum to sign non-disclosure agreements about the more sensitive details of what transpired. I refused the hush money. The truth of Ferran's living essence should not be buried. Commander Altan, his spirit broken by the planet's fury, and the corporate board's pivot left on the next transport, muttering about wasted potential. The paramilitary also packed up, presumably to chase salvage elsewhere. Kiera, though, stayed. I did too. Having seen Ferran's wonders, having felt the planet's heartbeat under my skin, I could not imagine leaving it to an uncertain fate. The memory of the dais, the spire, and our shared connection bound me here, as surely as gravity. Professor Rowan, likewise, remained to supervise responsible research. He established a small station near a less volatile site, hoping to learn from the data crystals. Perhaps in time, new knowledge could be gleaned without harming the planet. As the dust of conflict settled, Kiera and I trekked back across the dunes toward the place she once called home. The desert was quiet now, with no mercenaries or corporate rovers prowling. We carried limited supplies, a couple of rifles, and a single rover generously loaned by Draven, who departed for a safer assignment. Standing before the remains of her old shelter in the rocky hollow, we found it damaged but not destroyed. Sand drifted in gentle mounds against the walls. Kiera's few possessions lay scattered. Wordlessly, we set about repairing it, salvaging what we could from the rover's cargo. Days blurred into a simple rhythm, gathering water from hidden springs, reinforcing the roof, hunting desert creatures for sustenance. In that quiet labor, an unexpected peace blossomed between us. Though we spoke in halting phrases, a mixture of her language and mine, our bond transcended words. I would awaken in the night to find her gazing at the stars, lips parted as if listening, and I, too, would feel Ferran's subtle pulse, a comforting presence beneath the shifting sands. Occasionally, Rowan or a few researchers came by to consult with Kiera about safe passages to minor ruins, trading seeds and tools. They walked lightly, mindful of the planet's boundaries. A new respect had been born. One evening, the setting sun stained the sky with molten gold. Kiera and I sat atop a boulder, watching the dunes ripple in the cooling air. The horizon stretched out like a tapestry of red and orange. I thought back to the day I first crashed here, battered and lost, and how a feral huntress appeared outside my wrecked transport just staring at me. Now, as the desert breeze ruffled her hair, I marveled at how far we had come. My voice quavered with emotion. We've saved Ferran from exploitation, at least for now. But is that enough? She turned to me, amber eyes soft, a gentle hand pressed to my chest. Ferran, see you. Me, she murmured. We, stay. Protect. A warmth filled me, stronger than any sun-scorched sand. Her meaning was clear. We had become caretakers of this planet's fragile balance. There would always be new threats, corporations, mercenaries, or others lured by ancient power. Yet Kiera and I would remain, defending Ferran's secrets, ensuring the planet's voice was heard. As the last light faded, I realized I had found more than survival here. I'd found purpose, companionship, maybe love. In an age of starships and infinite frontiers, I chose to stay on a remote desert world, bound by fate to a mysterious huntress and the living spirit of Ferran. And though our days would be filled with challenges, our hearts beat in harmony with the planet's pulse, forging a bond deeper than any cargo contract or corporate claim. A final swirl of dusk breeze caressed us, as though Ferran itself offered a gentle benediction. The sky shifted to twilight, and the first stars winked into being. With Kiera by my side, I felt a profound sense of home.